I probably just put pen all over my forehead.
Thanks. Yeah.
Are all the cameras on? Oh, is everything on?
Yes.
Oh, one film.
I think our director is saying we should get started. You can do that.
Okay. And I'll just move.
You did. That's great.
Move the recording. That's the signal for stuff. Hi everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of Nights at the Round Table. Today we are discussing the novel by David Mitchell called Cloud Atlas. It is a series of 6 interlocking stories, I suppose, with the main theme of most of the main characters having a specific birthmark. And I don't want to go too much into it because there are a lot of themes that you could draw out of this book. So I'm just going to start with general impressions. Tracy?
As a book, it was a bit challenging to read it through because I enjoyed it in general, but it was a bit challenging. I listen to it as an audiobook, so there is a bit of a difference in that, of course, from physically reading a book, but that's how I listen to, that's how I deal with most books these days, is audiobooks. So in general, yes, I did enjoy it. I did find moments when I was like overwhelmed with the, okay, what?
Yeah.
But as an overall journey, it was interesting to how things got pulled together, which is always, a good thing to happen in a book, for it to actually start to come together at the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I really enjoyed it. It was a bit challenging, and I think that was more to the continually changing style of writing in this book. So, because basically, as soon as I got used to one style, it switched. And then I'm like, oh, damn it! But it was a really fascinating read, and it really did hold my attention, particularly because each of the 6 stories was broken up into 2. And it went up in a pyramid, basically. So you have part 1s of stories 1 through 6, although 6 is complete. And then it goes back down again in the same order. So it goes from the Pacific Journal to the Letters to the Half-Lives to the Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish to the Horizon of Somni, and then the story that I had the most difficulty with because of style.
Oh, see, I loved it.
I reckon to hear it, it would have been awesome.
Okay.
But to read it was a little
more difficult. Okay.
Especially
I sat laughing through the whole thing, even though it had a darkness to it as a story.
Yeah.
But the style of writing,
yes, it was quite humorous.
Enjoyed it.
And actually, I read everything in a fairly broad Australian accent. Mostly because the slang that they used was really easy to pick up.
Right.
Like spesh. Sounds like something an Australian would come up with. Because for suspicious, we say sus.
Okay. Yes.
So, that's a bit sus. And also calling all the dogs dingoes.
Oh, okay, yes.
So even though it was supposed to be set on Hawaii, I think, everything just was ridiculously
as soon as you hit a post-apocalyptic world,
I guess.
It has to go Mad Max again.
But then the stories went back down to finish each story. So part 2 of The Horizon was next, followed by part 2 of Timothy Cavendish, etc. Back down to the beginning, and the second part of the Pacific Journal. It was really interesting how it all locked in together.
Yes, and you just have these little one sentence would, in some cases, felt like, oh, that's the tie-in to the other stories.
Yeah, most of the time it was the birthmark.
Right, exactly, yeah. But yeah, the Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish I found was very entertaining.
Wasn't that a great story?
Yes.
I really liked it.
And I just totally relate to the brother choosing to do that to his brother.
Really?
Nothing in specific relation to my family. It's more just as a general concept of, okay, he's just gone, it's too annoying, let's just do this.
Let's pack him away.
And for his own good.
His own good.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I was actually quite mortified at that.
Siblings beware, I'm the youngest. So, That's okay. None of them are going to see this anyway.
Oh, well, that's disappointing.
Well, yeah, maybe I'll send them directly.
Siblings beware. That's the title
yes, that's
email.
right, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, no, I found that absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And then the brother dying of a stroke. And I was
Yes.
just, oh,
Well,
of
that's
course,
just
because
karma
of course.
adjusting things.
Right,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Oh, God.
Oh, but Dr. Goose, that was just,
I was...
you know, creeped out right from the first meeting of him, and which was exactly what you wanted to happen
Yeah,
with the
and
story.
then the reversal, I'm like,
Mhm.
really? Because he seemed really crazy when you first met him.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, I accepted it because, you know, everybody has their foibles. And then
Right.
at the end of that story, at the end of the book, I'm just like, don't pray.
Yes.
My
But
God.
anybody who's sifting through the beach looking for
Teeth, I guess.
Although as a money-making opportunity, that's a pretty dark one.
Okay, yes. That, yes. But, you know, as an archaeologist, I'm like, no, whatever.
True enough.
I totally do
but I
that.
mean, he totally said, you know how much you make from this? This was a money-making thing. This was not a historical,
No,
you
that's
know.
very true. And it was a money-making revenge thing, wasn't it? Because he was going to fling a whole bunch of teeth at some woman.
Yes. So yeah, this character's pretty obviously, you know, crazy and pushing.
Yeah, but crazy isn't necessarily malicious.
Okay, true enough. But
And what he did at the end was
Yes.
horrifically malicious.
yes.
Oh. Thank goodness for what was his name? As we went scroll through.
The Maori slave.
The Moriori slave.
Moriori slave. Atwa.
Atwa, yeah.
Who can read faster? On the Wikipedia.
You can scroll faster.
Yeah.
I misplaced my notes, that's why. By misplaced, I mean I probably threw them out.
I didn't make any notes. I just needed the Wikipedia article for the name reference because there are so many characters in the stories. It's interesting how the variation in the characters. And I did read in the there's a comment in the Wikipedia article about the author commenting on how that this is a representation of a reincarnation, like each character through the stories. So but that's not necessarily clear in the book. Other than the birthmark.
Exactly, linking to most people, and
the moment of Louisa Ray recognizing the music and
or when she was reading the letters, being like this is
very connected,
weirdly familiar.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's true. That was the only indication that was. I was wondering about that. So like, these could be reincarnations or not. Although I liked that the author gave truth to that in the final story. It was in the Slush's whatever.
Yeah, crossing.
Yeah, Slush's crossing.
Yeah.
And everything after.
Yeah.
When he was talking about how they believe in Somni as their deity, and also that they believe that all souls of the Valleymen will be reincarnated back into Valleymen.
Right.
So they don't really have much to fear. And then as he's lying in the canoe, he's looking up and he sees all the clouds and he's like, well, there are the souls streaking across the sky.
Right.
And he's like, oh, that's lovely.
Yes. And there's some really powerful moments, like even the messages of Somni, her declarations that she creates are very powerful and cross time.
Exactly,
It's not specific to the fabricants only. It can be applied across.
Yeah, which is why I think the Valleymen ended up worshipping her after the Great Fall.
Right.
Because her declarations were what stuck.
Yes.
So even though she was captured and ultimately killed, she kind of had the last laugh after humanity devoured itself.
Yes.
That was actually my favorite story, was The Horizon of Somni, 451, in the whole series, just because, I don't know, I don't want to say I can relate. I can relate to the struggle for ascendancy.
Yes.
The struggle for personhood, maybe. I don't know. It really caught my attention, and I really loved the story. And I felt really betrayed at the end. When she's like, yeah, by the way, I knew it was all government stuff. And I'm like, oh, but what was his name? Hujin?
That's the good thing with listening to it, because you presume that whoever's reading it has been told how to pronounce the names.
Oh, that's true.
Haiju.
I'm like, oh. And then I started thinking about his character. Was he roped into the lie himself and actually believed he was working for the Union rather than for the government? Or was he a government agent all along?
Which you don't really know.
It's never resolved.
Yes.
So, in my head, I've decided that he was roped into the lie as well, because I liked him.
Yes.
It's just upsetting thinking of him as a triple-crossing government agent.
But yes, the complicated levels within
right.
that.
Wasn't that story? Yeah, it was my favorite of the. Although I also like the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing, mostly for the ethnographic stuff.
Okay. Yes.
The history of the Moriori and the Maori.
Yes.
And that stuff I really love.
Yes. Yeah. And it was so sweet, the whole concept of, if you killed a man, then you lose.
Yeah, the Moriori concept,
yes.
and you lose your mana and you're not a person anymore.
And you don't exist anymore. And this is how this entire culture has maintained, this.
Yeah. And then the lesson of the story is quite depressing.
Yes.
Moral of the story is peace is only attainable if your neighbors feel the same way.
Yeah. So there was this voice from beyond that came and inspired a comment that, Somni 451 might have some connection to Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451.
I haven't read the book, so I can't speak to that.
And it was too long ago, so I can't speak to it either, so...
Discuss in the comments.
That's right, discuss in the comments. And tag WTL in the comments.
Sweet Krakatoa.
I don't think Krakatoa is mentioned either. Just, FYI.
Since I misplaced my notes, I can't write. I can't relate all of the quotes that I found really fascinating. But there was a sentiment in the Pacific Journal, which I find in a lot of early early ethnographies. There we go, language hard. And for the first little bit, I found it shockingly colonialist. And it took me a while to remember that, yes, it was way back in the day when people actually did think like this.
You were surprised. Okay.
No, it's not that I was surprised. It's just that I forgot how incredibly awful the philosophy of the time and place was. Dr. Goose's warning to Adam about Altua's friendship.
Right.
Like a master, the friendship should be no more than the fondness between a master and his favorite hunting hound.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really? And then I'm like, oh yeah, they did actually think like that. I mean, this is the time when there was a literal hunting campaign against the indigenous Tasmanians, where they literally rounded them up and shot them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep forgetting.
Sadly, that's both of our background.
Right?
Our ancestry comes from horrendous
stuff that these people did. I'm sorry. On behalf of my ancestry, I'm really sorry. They were assholes.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me a while to get over the colonialist shock of the piece. But I loved how Adam himself came around by the end of that story.
And that's who you want to connect with, I think. Just at least I hope you want to connect with him. Because that's where we've come to, or at least hopefully we've come to, is most of us, yes. This, you just don't go there. That's incorrect.
Yes.
And,
Indigenous islanders are not your pets.
Something to me.
Something like that. But at the end of that story also, one of my favorite quotes, I think, from any book ever, is the final line, but what is an ocean but a multitude of drops? And I'm just like, oh, yes, exactly. Because for those who don't know, spoiler alert, Adam becomes an abolitionist. And again, mispronounced, my god.
Someone was up late last night making chainmail.
Adam becomes an abolitionist, and he imagines what his father was saying. Like, well, what difference do you think you can make? You're one person. It's but a drop in a vast ocean. And he's like, yes, but an ocean is nothing but a multitude of drops. And I'm like, yes, that's it exactly. You don't have to do grand things. You don't have to be the tsunami that sweeps everything away. You have to do simple things like vote. Or it's really the easiest way to make a difference is to vote.
Right.
Or, volunteer in a shelter or something, anything. It doesn't have to be grand gestures to make a difference. And I love that quote so much. I'm seriously thinking about getting it tattooed to me.
With a little comet with a little star shape?
No. Just the words.
Just the words.
What is an ocean but a multitude of drops? Yeah. Sorry.
So the other connecting story that I actually found very interesting was the letters from
yes. Oh, that was quite sad.
Zettelgum. I have no idea how to pronounce that, but anyway.
Zettel.
Yes. So this composer who's just this free spirit, and he's a bit of a jerk, and okay, he's a lot of a jerk, and that's fine, but he's an artist, and he's doing what he feels he has to do to get ahead, and then he's dealing with jerks too.
Right.
So it's like this whole cluster of people who are obnoxiously messed up. Yeah. And yet out of it, he produces this piece of music that is again an interconnectedness through everything, and it's all related through his letters that he sends to his lover, and who is a scientist who then appears
in the next
later,
story,
which was the only time that there's an actual character in two stories. Kind of thing. So that was
actually
nice.
when I read it, I'm like, Sixsmith.
Yes.
Is this the same
Yes.
Sixsmith? And then later on in the story, you find out it is, and I'm like, oh,
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry.
But it gives such a I don't know, kind of a romanticism to the jerk, composer and everything. But at the same time, the whole society and the interactions, it's that whole sordid, higher class and
the clash of egos.
Yes.
And
so I found that very interesting. And,
that was, actually, now that I think about it, that was really fiercely interesting. And the ending of that story was very upsetting.
And yet, how could it be anything else?
Yeah, exactly. And yet, quite fitting.
Yes, because if you're that tormented and messed up, then just, life is, hard.
Hard, really hard. And although I liked that he said, don't think that I did it for love, it was because I created this piece of music and it is all of me and now there is nothing left.
Yeah.
And so it was very beautiful, but also quite heartbreaking.
Yes.
That was a good story too.
Yeah.
The twist at the end with what's her name? Yona? The older guy's wife.
Oh, Jocasta.
Jocasta, thank you. Being in on it with her husband.
Right.
The whole
the awareness being there.
Yeah, just to get hooks into the poor guy. That's really awful.
And again, it's an ongoing theme through the book.
That's
too.
true.
There's people who manipulate and then what comes out of it is these amazing changes kind of things. The music coming out of that, the whole government thing with Somni. And then comes out of it is the
collapses of the declaration, which means an entire way of life for people who follow the collapse. But I was always curious about the nuclear power plants. If they were allowed to continue, and that's part of the reason why the Deadlands are creeping up on civilization.
Which would make sense.
That's it,
because I don't think Louisa Ray really successfully achieved her
But
goal.
she did.
Well, she did, but I mean,
and there was inquiries apparently.
Yes. But
they didn't say that they would have been shut down.
Corporation, you know. Yeah.
Yes, well. Which is part of what I liked about Sonmi's story was it wasn't so much government, they weren't cities, it was just corporocracy.
Yes.
Where the government was corporations and your civic duty was to consume.
Yeah.
Endless amounts of consumption until ultimately we consumed ourselves. Which I can almost see happening. It was very plausible, which is quite great.
These people.
Yeah. I think the author hits the nail on the head when he notes that the worst of humanity is this perpetual drive to push others down in an effort to elevate ourselves, and also like a hunger for more and more, and like it's never enough.
Yeah, that's true. Though I did find it amusing the references to Disney's.
Yeah, Disney's. I'm like, they caught me by surprise until they spelt it out for me. I'm like,
seriously?
oh.
Were you tired?
I was tired. Yeah, I was reading it at like 2:00 in the morning, Friday night, because again, I found it really compelling and really hard to just shut away and put away, because it made me work. Like my mind was constantly going, which I love about books, by the way. Books that make me constantly think are really good in my opinion.
And that's what I think I enjoyed about the writing of the Solutions Cross, and just because every phrase was a variation on our language.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's
And
great.
puzzling
Oh,
it
that's
was
great.
yeah.
And yes, hearing it would obviously be easier than
it's
reading it. But
it's like the difference between hearing and reading Anglo-Saxon, because I took it in university.
Right.
Hearing it spoken, I'm like, oh yeah,
that makes sense.
It makes sense. I know what they're talking about. But reading it, I'm like, it's Harvard.
Right.
What But hearing it spoken, I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And so it was almost like this little nod to the other story whenever they started using that terminology in the Somni 451 story, just saying, Disney's and I forget what else there was, but there's, a few different terms that I'm like, oh, that's great, look at that. And oh yeah, they couldn't use that in the movie because there would be rights issues, but
the things you can get away with in print. I liked that there weren't movies anymore. They were Disney's, because corporations have taken over so fully.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And apparently I missed it, but there was a comment in the Wikipedia article that reference to the Golden Arches and that being
Papa Song's Golden Arches.
Oh, that's true. Okay, see, I just registered the first name as I was listening to it.
Yeah, the whole idea of fabricants was really intriguing and terrifying.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was depressing. But I can totally see it happening, again, because of the fight for a living wage that's happening right now for big corporations who make millions of dollars in profit every year and then refuse to pay their workers a living wage. I can totally see, say, McDonald's going with fabricants who will never complain. Like these clones that are specifically designed to serve and will wake up at a certain time because of chemicals that you put in the vents or whatever.
Yeah.
I can see it happening. McDonald's. And it's upsetting and all too relatable. I think that's what's upsetting.
And they weren't just in that realm. That was the thing.
No,
it was across the board. And,
everywhere.
And the whole scene with the bridge and the doll
was
like,
oh
wow.
It's just
go read the book.
Yeah. That scene.
Yeah. It's short, but it says so much. It just,
And then you find out later it was designed to, which is equally as awful.
Exactly. Manipulation of even the psyche of a fabricant.
The ascended fabricant.
Yeah.
Oh, just poor little. What was it? A zizzle?
Yeah, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, poor little thing. I mean, it's like what we would see now with all of the puppy. The negative puppy stuff. Yeah, exactly. Any negative treatment of animals.
Oh, yes.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it wrenches your heart, and you're like, how can people do that? And it brings up questions, and it makes you think.
Yeah.
And so adopt, don't shop, and there are a lot of rescue dogs out there that need to be.
Yeah, and rescue dogs tend to be the sweetest animals.
Oh, exactly.
Such amazing animals. Plus, then, you know, they won't suffer from the same inbreeding problems.
That's right. Exactly. But yeah.
That was an aside.
I was just going with that flow of the
Yeah.
volunteer and do something small
Yeah,
to
do
make
something
your
small.
world better.
Adopt an animal.
That's
Don't throw one over a bridge.
Yeah, because that's wrong. And don't take pictures of your kid dangling it over a bridge, because that's wrong too.
Yeah. Oof.
Bang.
Yeah, no, it was. I really enjoyed how these stories interlocked and how there were several major themes going through each and every story.
Yes.
I have to say, it was a good read. Any final thoughts before you give it a star rating?
I think for me, what was an interesting aspect of reading the book was I had just watched the movie again previous to that, and so as I'm reading the book again, I have visuals on the characters, but I did my best to try to not expect too much similarity, and I would say do both. You know, read the book and then watch the movie, and you know, accept that there is going to be some differences and everything, but at the same time, I think it's an interesting read. So I definitely enjoyed it, and yeah, I have to get it to my sister because we already recommended it to her on the weekend. So.
Yeah. Okay. I haven't actually watched the film yet. It is on my list. You know, when I get a breathing moment to
3 hours.
a 3-hour breathing moment to watch the film. But as a book, I really enjoyed it. It's one of the few books that had me staying up well past my bedtime just to get through the next section of story. Like, I really needed to find out what happened to Louisa Ray. I really needed to. And then I really needed to find out what happened to Somni and how her story ended, because it was reference to her dying early. So I'm assuming that she was killed, but I need to find out why and what happened in between. And it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Again, Slush's crossing. Slush's crossing and everything after was a little difficult, challenging for me to read, mostly because the gap in that style was so big compared to the gaps in the previous styles. Like, the Pacific Journal was more or less what you would expect a journal of an educated American operating in the early 1900s would be, or late 1800s. And Slush's crossing was like somebody who's never read a book in their damn life. So yeah, it was tough to get through, but it was very entertaining. It's a good book. I really do recommend it. So if you were to give it a star rating,
What's our list?
Out of 5.
Out of 5. Okay. I would go 4. Yeah, and allow yourself the time to read it, like, focused.
yes, yeah.
Give yourself the time. Don't be trying to rush through it. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. 4.5 for me. It was good. I enjoyed it, as challenging as they were. I enjoyed the changing styles because it kept it fresh. And I liked the way it was structured too. It was unique. Like, each story split in half, and then you go back down through them all. And again, that last closing line, when I closed the book, I was like, yeah. So yeah, 4.5. Go read the book. All right. Would you like to pick the next book?
Fahrenheit 451.
No, it's not on there, I don't think.
There you go.
Oh, The Stand by Stephen King. Yes. Our cameraman is very happy about that. So that will be our next book. Join us in a fortnight. If you have anything to say about Cloud Atlas, the book, or even the film, go down below and leave a comment. You can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, that one was totally worth it.